Let's pass the mic to Medea and Omar. Please give short answers on these, and we'll call the session to a close and take a break.
Short answer to really difficult questions. I would say, I think most of the questions for me were about, investigations, what's next in the future. So let me just say a couple of things. Maybe we can just pass the mic and have everyone briefly answer this, and we'll get you to lunch. What I would say in terms of what's next, Human Rights Watch has done many investigations. Rabaa was a major one. We continue, to do work on the ground, documenting abuses about Rabaa and other events. In terms of Rabaa specifically, we've done the investigations, and now, Human Rights Watch is engaged in advocacy. I've personally been to Geneva to the UN Human Rights Council. My colleagues in capitals around the world are not only pushing for the UN Human Rights Council to open an investigation, but are pushing, along the lines Medea said, for domestic courts around the world to open criminal investigations into those that were involved. We'll continue to push that every opportunity we can. And that's why I always, accept a chance to speak about this, is because we want to reinforce that message. In terms of the question about Baradei, what I would say is the following. If you read our report, we identify many officials, civilian, military, police, that evidence suggests should be investigated. It's not, a criminal court ultimately to look at accountability. The three officials that the evidence that most clearly indicates played a command and control responsibility in terms of ordering and ensuring the execution were Sisi, Mohammed Ibrahim, and Medhat Manshawi, but there are civilian figures, including Adli Mansour, Hazan Bablawi, Baradei would be among them, that their role should be investigated. Although I think, again, Baradei did resign that day, did push, many times within the government for a change. So those are factors that a court would all look at considering such questions. And I would just end in terms of the future by saying it's a very dark time in Egypt, very much so, and I think in the short run we haven't seen any sort of indication by this government that they're going to do the kind of things that strong men, when they come to power in the Arab world, try to do. They sometimes open the space a little bit to solidify their power. It seems Sisi has moved the opposite way and is not allowing even the slightest crack, even in clear cases like the Jazeera journalists or other very clearly peaceful demonstrators, to move towards reconciliation or release. So the short run is going to be, I think, a very deep struggle, especially as Medea mentioned, with the international community wanting to turn the page on Egypt. But again, I think in the medium to long run, there is discontent in Cairo that's not maybe visible if you turn on the news media, but is very much there. And I think things could change faster than anyone in this space. So I'll leave it at that. If I had a crystal ball and I had the answer for you, I would be somewhere else now.
I think just from an organizing perspective, what's really important and what I think that Gaza did very well was connecting the issue of police brutality with what's happening in the United States. And I think that it's a golden opportunity with regards to Egypt, looking at what's happening in Ferguson and trying to connect different stories and creating solidarity movements with different people who are on the ground and continuing to magnify and present their stories to the world when the media is trying to move on and making some noise that they can't move on. I think that's our role as students, as different organizations.
So yes, the U.S. has supported many coups over the years, and in fact has participated and even been responsible for many coups. But we're supposed to be evolving as civilizations and holding our governments accountable. And so I think in the case of Egypt, I talked about the U.S. government being supportive of Sisi. There is a lot of division within the U.S. government, and even in Congress a lot of division, and they recognize how hypocritical it looks for the United States to be supporting this government. And we've got to push those divisions even harder. There still is $575 million that has not been released to Egypt. This money is important not just for money, for symbolism. If we can stop that from going, in order to release that money, John Kerry would have to publicly certify that Egypt was on the road to democracy. And that would be tremendously embarrassing for him to do globally. So we have to keep pushing on that. We have to demand that our Congress join with us in saying, keep that money from going to Egypt. And the last thing I would want to say, that I think one thing that is holding up unity within Egypt and support for Egypt around the world is still the division between the religious folks, the supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood, and the more secular people. And those divisions are being healed in some places and not being healed in other places. The secular folks, many of them supported the coup. And so there's a lot of animosity there, but they're now recognizing that they too are victims of this coup. So that healing has to happen in order to have more strength in opposition within and outside of Egypt, and then I think we can see real change.
Alright, just two brief remarks because I don't think we have much time. One of the questions that was asked was, what's my opinion on the near future of Egypt? And what I have to really say about that is, since the coup really took power, as Omar has said, they, like most dictatorships, after they take power, they really slow down, they open the air a little bit. Egypt has only increased its human rights violations, only increased its oppression, and I feel like what they're doing is they're pushing the Egyptian people into really a corner. And as she said, people who supported the coup are now coming to realize what they supported, and they really they recognize the direction that Egypt is taking. And this is changing a lot of people's opinions. A lot of people are really, every day, people are really realizing this coup for what it is and really reverting in their support for the coup. And I feel like it is their oppression and it is their violations of any type of respect for human rights that's really going to seal the deal, to really seal the coffin on this regime and bring it to a near end. And I had one more question that I wanted to ask. It was, how did this experience change my life? And very briefly, I just wanted to explain that before visiting these protests, before going out into Egypt, I was just your average teenager. I was an idiot, to the very least description of the word. And I really didn't have a care for politics. I didn't care what was going on in the world. I was all about me and having fun, and that was really the center of my life. And it is really upon visiting these protests and seeing these people that it gave me a totally different perspective, that these are people that are putting their whole lives on the line just for the sake of standing up for something that means to them. And that sort of gave me a whole new meaning to life and a whole new perspective, that each and every single one of us, all of you attending in the audience today and anybody that is watching, that we all have the opportunity to stand up for something that means to us, that means something to us, and we could really change the world if we really work hard at it, or we could plant the seeds that might change the world. It's all about what we put into it and our perspective, and inshallah khair. Thank you.